What is going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Daves-Raves. This time we're finally finishing chapter 6, or chapter 3. This will be subchapter 6, which is talking about Bill Denbrough. Bill Denbrough takes a seat. Takes time out. What a Johnny Bateman. We, Audra repeated. She looked at him, puzzled, a bit afraid, and then tucked her bare feet up and under her. The floor was cold. The whole cottage was cold, to come to that. South of England had been experiencing an exceptionally dank spring, and more than once, on his regular morning and evening walks, Bill Denbrough had found himself thinking of May. Thinking in a surprised, vague way of Derry. The cottage was supposed to have central heating. The ad had said so. There certainly was a furnace down there in a tidy little basement, tucked away in what had been a cold bin. But he and Audrey had discovered early on in the shoot that the British idea of central heating was not at all the same as the American one. Seeing the Brits believed you had central heating as long as you didn't have to piss away a scrim of ice, the toilet bowl when you got up in the morning. It's morning now. Just a quarter after 8. Bill had hung the phone up 5 minutes ago. Bill, you can't just leave. You know that. I have to. There was a hutch on the far side of the room. He went to it, took a bottle of Glenfiddich from the top shelf, and poured himself a drink. Some of it soft over the side of the glass. Fuck, he muttered. Who is that on the telephone? What are you scared of, Bill? I'm not scared. Oh? Your hands always shake like that? You always have your first drink before breakfast? He came back to his chair, robe flapping around his ankles, and sat down. He tried to smile, but it was poor effort. No, I'm not really, Johnny. It's all good, bro. And also this because the last couple of reading streams I did weren't that great. So yeah, that's why I'm punishing people. It's not really punishing, but you know what I mean. He came back to his chair, ropes flapping around his ankles, and sat down. He tried to smile, but it was a poor effort, and he gave it up. On the telly, the BBC announcer was wrapping up the morning batch of bad news before going on to last evening's football scores. When they had arrived in the small suburban village of Fleet, a month before the shoot was scheduled to begin, they had both marveled over the technical quality of British television. And yeah, after this stream, I'm going to be streaming Fortnite one more time. And after that, that's it. It'll strictly be reading streams. When they had arrived in the small suburban village of Fleet a month before the shoot was scheduled to begin, they had both marveled over the technical quality of the British television. On that good pie color set, spelled P-Y-E, it really did look as though you could climb right inside. More lines or something, Bill had said. I don't know what it is, but it's great, Audra had replied. That was before they discovered that much of this programming consisted of American shows such as Dallas and endless British sports events, ranging from arcane and boring champion dart throwing, in which all participants looked like hypersensitive sumo wrestlers, to simply boring. British football was bad. Cricket was even worse. I've been thinking about home a lot lately, Bill said, and sipped his drink. Home? She said, and was so honestly puzzled that he laughed. Poor Audra. Married almost 11 years to the guy, and you don't know diddly squat about him. What do you know about that? He laughed again and swallowed the rest of his drink. His laughter had a quality she cared for as little as seeing him with a glass of scotch in his hand at this hour in the morning. The laugh sounded like something that really wanted to be a howl of pain. I wonder if any of the others have got husbands and wives or are just finding out about how little they know. I suppose they must. Billy, I know that I love you, she said. For 11 years, that's been enough. I know. He smiled at her. The smile was sweet, tired, and scared. Please, please tell me what this is about. She looked at him with her lovely gray eyes, sitting there in a tatty, leased house chair with her feet curled beneath the hem of her nightgown. A woman he had loved, married, and still loved. He tried to see through her eyes, to see what she knew. He tried to see it as a story. He could, but he knew it would never sell. Here's a boy, a poor boy, from the state of Maine. He goes to the university on a scholarship. All his life, he wants to be a writer. But when he enrolls in the writing courses, he finds himself lost without a compass in a strange and frightening land. There's one guy who wants to be Updike. There's another one who wants to be a New England version of Faulkner. One who wants to write novels about grim lives in a poor blank verse. There's a girl who admires Joyce Carol Oates, but feels that because Oates was neutered in a sexist society, she's radioactive in a literary sense. Oates is unable to be clean, this girl says. She'll be cleaner. There's a short, fat grad student who can't or won't speak about the mutter. This guy has written a play in which there are 9 characters. Each of them says only a single word. Little by little, the playgoers realize that when you put the single word together, you come out with war is the tool of the sexist death merchants. This fellow's play receives an A from the man who teaches EH141, creative writing honor seminar. This instructor had published 4 books of poetry and his master's thesis, all with the university press. He smokes pot and wears a peace medallion. The Fat Mutterer's play is produced by Guerrilla Theater Group during a strike to end the war, which shuts down the campus in May of 1970. The instructor plays one of the characters. Bill Denbrough, meanwhile, has written 1 locked room mystery tale, 3 science fiction stories, and several horror tales, which are a great deal of Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, and Richard Matheson. In later years, he'll say that the stories resemble a mid-1800s funeral act equipped with a supercharger and a painted Dayglow red. One of the SF tales earned him a B. This is better, the instructor writes on the title page. In the Alien Encounter Strike, we see the vicious circle in which the violence begets violence. I particularly like the needle-nosed spacecraft as a symbol of the socio-sexual incursion. While this remains a slightly confused undertone throughout, it is interesting. All the others didn't know better than a C. Finally, he stands up in class one day after the discussion of a sallow young woman's vignetti about a cow's examination of discarded engine block in a deserted field. This may or may not be after a nuclear war. It's gone on for 70 minutes or so. The salad girl, who smokes 1 Winston after another and picks occasionally at the pimples, which nestle in the cobbles of her building. What's up, Claptop? We doing good tonight? Who smokes 1 Winston after another and picks up occasionally after the pimples, which nestle in the hostels of her temples. And insists that the vignetti is a socio-political statement in the manner of the early Orwell. Most of the class and the instructor agree. But still, the discussion drones on. When Bill stands up, the class looks at him. He is tall and has a certain presence. Speaking carefully, not stuttering. Yeah, not stuttering better than 5 years. He says, I don't understand this at all. I don't understand any of this. Why does a story have to be socio anything? Politics, culture, history? Aren't those natural ingredients in any story if it's told well? I mean, he looks around, sees hostile eyes, and realizes dimly that they see this as some work of attack, some sort of attack. Maybe even that it is. They are thinking that there is a sexist death merchant in their nest. I mean, can't you guys just let a story be a story? No one replies. Silence spins out. He stands there looking from one cool set of eyes to the next. The salad girl scuffs out smoke and stubs her cigarette in an ashtray she brought along in her backpack. Finally, the instructor says softly, as if to a child having an inexplicable tantrum, do you believe William Faulkner was just telling stories? Do you believe Shakespeare was just interested in making a buck? Come now, Bill. Tell us what you think. I think that's pretty close to the truth, Bill says after a long moment in which he honestly considered the question. And in their eyes, he reads a kind of damnation. I suggest, the instructor says, toying with his pen and smiling at Bill with half-lidded eyes, that you have a great deal to learn. The applause starts somewhere in the back of the room. Bill leaves, but returns next week, determined to stick with it. In the meantime, between, he has written a story called The Dark, a tale about a small boy who discovers a monster in the cellar of his house. The little boy faces it, battles it, finally kills it. He feels a kind of holy exaltation as he goes on about the business of writing the story. He even feels that he's not just so much telling the story as he is allowing the story to flow through him. At one point, he puts his pen down and takes his hot and aching hand out into 10-degree December cold weather, where it nearly smokes from the temperature change. He walks around. Green cut-off boots, squeaking in the seams. Squeaking in the snow like tiny sugar hinges, which need oil, and his head seems to bulge with the story. It is a little scary, the way it needs to get out. He feels that if it cannot escape by the way of his racing hand, that will pop his eyes out, and it's an urgency to escape and be concrete. Going to knock the shit out of it. He combines the blowing winter dark and laughs, a shaky laugh. He is aware that he has finally discovered how to do just that. After 10 years of trying, he has suddenly found the starter button on the vast dead bulldozer taking up so much space inside his head. It started up. It was revving. It is nothing pretty, this big machine. It was not made for taking pretty girls to proms. It is not a status symbol. It means business. It can knock things down, but isn't careful, it will knock him down. He rushes inside and finishes The Dark at white heat, writing until 4 o'clock in the morning, and finally falling asleep over his ring binder. If someone had suggested to him that he was really writing about his brother George, he would have been surprised. He has not thought about George in years, or so he honestly believes. The story comes back from the instructor with an F slashed into the title page. 2 words are called beneath in capital letters. Pulp, screams one. Crap, screams the other. Bill takes the 15-page sheaf of manuscript over to the wood stove and opens the door. He is within bare reach of tossing it in when the absurdity of what he is doing strikes him. He sits down in his rocking chair, looks at his Grateful Dead poster, and starts to laugh. Pulp? Fine, let it be pulp. Woods were full of that. Let them fucking trees fall, Bill exclaims, and laughed until tears spurt from his eyes and rolled down his face. He retypes the title page, the one with the instructor's judgment on it, and sends it off to a men's magazine named White Tie. Or from what Bill can see, it actually should be titled Naked Girls Who Look Like Dying Drug Users. Yet his battered writer's market says they buy horror stories. And the 2 issues he has bought down at the local mom and pop store have indeed included 4 horror stories sandwiched between the naked girls and ads for dirty movies and potency pills. One of them, by a man named Dennis Etchimson, is actually quite good. He sends the dark off with no real hopes. He has submitted a good many stories to the magazines before with nothing to show for us but rejection slips. And is flabbergasted and delighted when the fiction editor of White Tie buys it for $200. Payment on publication. The assistant editor adds a short note which calls it the best damn horror story since Ray Bradbury's The Jar. He adds, too bad about only 70 people coast to coast will read it. But Bill Denbrough does not care. $200. He goes to his advisor with a drop card for EH141. His advisor initials it. Bill Denbrough staples the drop card to his assistant fiction, enters a congratulatory note, and tacks both to the bulletin board on the creative writing instructor's door. In the corner of the bulletin board, he sees an anti-war cartoon. And suddenly, as if moving of its own accord, his fingers pluck his pen from his breast pocket. Across the cartoon, he writes this. If fiction and politics ever really do become interchangeable, I'm going to kill myself. Because I don't know what else to do. See, politics always change. Stories never do. He paused, and then, feeling a bit small, but unable to help himself, he adds, I suggest you have a lot to learn. This drop card comes back to him in the campus mail 3 days later. The instructor initialed it. On the space marked grade at the time of drop, the instructor had not given him an incomplete or low C to which his running grades at the same time would have entitled him. Instead, another F is slashed angrily across the grade line. He loathed it. The instructor has written, you think money proves anything about anything, Denbrough? Well, actually, yes. Bill Denbrough says to his empty apartment, and once more begins to laugh crazily. In a senior year, in the senior year of college, he dares to write a novel because he has no idea what he's getting into. He escapes experience scratching frightened, but alive, with a manuscript nearly 500 pages long. He sends it out to the Viking press, knowing that will be the first of many drops for his book. Which is about ghosts. He likes Viking ships logo. And that actually is a good place to start his ending. As it turns out, the first stop is also the last stop. Vikings purchases the book. And for Bill Denbrough, the fairy tale begins. The man who was once known as Stuttering Bill had become a success at the age of 23. 3 years later, 3,000 miles from northern New England, he attains a queer kind of celebrity by marrying a woman who is a movie star and 5 years his senior at Hollywood's Church in the Pines. The gossip columnists give it 7 months. The only bet, they say, is whether the end will come in a divorce or an annulment. Friends and enemies on both sides of the match feel about the same. The age difference apart, the disparities are startling. He is tall, already balding, already inclining a bit inward towards fat. He speaks slowly in company, and at times seems nearly inarticulate. Audra, on the other hand, is auburn-haired, statistic, and gorgeous. She is less like an earthly woman than a creature from some semi-divine super race. He has been hired to do the screenplay of his second novel, The Black Rapids. Mostly because the right to do at least the first draft of the screenplay was an immutable condition of sale, in spite of his agent's moans that he was insane. And this draft had actually turned out pretty well. He had been invited out to Universal City for further rewrites and production meetings. Nice. His agent is a small woman named Susan Brown. She's exactly 5 feet tall. She is violently energetic and even more violently empathetic. Don't do that. Don't do it, Billy, she tells him. Kiss it off. We've got a lot of money tied up in it, and they'll get someone good to do the screenplay. Maybe even Goldman. Who? William Goldman. The only good writer who ever went out there and did both? What are you talking about, C's? He stayed here and he stayed good, she said. The odds on both are like the odds on beating lung cancer. Can be done. But who wants to try? You'll burn out on sex and booze. Or some of the nifty new drugs. Susan's crazily fascinating brown eyes sparkled vehemently at him. And if it turns out somebody's in Meatball who gets the assignment instead of someone like Goldman, so what? The book's on the shelf there. They can't change a word. Susan, listen to me, Billy. Take the money and run. You're young and strong. That's what they like. You go out there, and they will first separate you from your self-respect, and then from your ability to write a straight line from point A to point B. Oh, but nobody's up in there. Whoop, whoop. Last but not least, they will take you to your testes. You write like a grown-up, but you're just a kid with a very high forehead. I have to go. Did someone just fart in here? She returns. Must have, because something sure stinks. But I do. I have to. Jesus. I have to get away from New England. He is afraid to say what comes next. It's like mouthing a curse. He yells at her. I have to get away from Maine. Why, for God's sakes? I don't know. I just do. Are you telling me something real, Billy, or just talking like a writer? It's real. They are in bed together during this conversation. Her breasts are small like peaches, sweet like peaches. He loves her a lot, although not the way they both know would be a really good way to love. She sits up with a pool sheet in her lap and lights a cigarette. She's crying, but he doubts that she knows he knows. Just a shine in her eyes. It'd be tactful not to mention it, so he doesn't. He doesn't love her in that really good way, but he cares a mountain for her. Go on then, she says in a dry business-like voice as she turns back to him. Give me a call when you're ready, and if you still have the strength, I'll come and pick up the pieces, if there are any left. The film version of The Black Rapids is called Pit of the Black Demon, and Audra Phillips is cast as the lead. The title is horrible, but the movie turns out to be quite good. And the only part of him he loses in Hollywood is his heart. Bill, Audra began again, bringing him out of these memories. He saw she had snapped off the TV. He glanced out the TV window and saw fog nuzzling against the panes. I'll explain as much as I can. You deserve that. But first, do 2 things for me. All right. Fix yourself another cup of tea and tell me what you know about me, or what you think you know. She looked at him, puzzled, and then went into the highboy. I know you're from Maine, she said, making herself tea from the breakfast pot. She's not British, but just a touch of clipped British had crept into her voice, a holdover from the part she had played in the attic room. The movie had come over here to do. The movie they had come over here to do. It was Bill's first original screenplay. He had been offered the directorial shot as well. Thank God he had declined that. His leaving now would have complicated the job of bitching things up. He knew they would all say the whole career. Billy Denbrough finally shows his true colors. Just another fucking writer, but crazier than a shithouse rat. God knows he felt crazy right about now. I know you had a brother and that you loved him very much, and that he died, Audrey went on. I know that you grew up in a town called Derry, moved to Bangor about 2 years after your brother died, and moved to Portland when you were 14. I know your dad died of lung cancer when you were 17, and you wrote a bestseller when you were still in college, paying your way with a scholarship and a part-time job in a textile mill. That must have seemed like very strange to you. The change in income and prospects. She returned to his side of the room. He saw in her face then the realization of hidden spaces between them. I know that you wrote Black Rapids a year later and came out to Hollywood. And a week before shooting started on the movie, you met a very mixed woman named Audra Phillips, who knew a little bit about what you must have seen and been through. Crazy decompression. But she had been plain old Audrey Philpott 5 years before, and this woman was drowning. Audra, don't. Her eyes were steady, holding us. Oh, why not? Let's tell the truth and shame the devil. I was drowning. I discovered poppers 2 years before I met you. Then a later year, I discovered a Coke, and that was even better. Popper in the morning, Coke in the afternoon, wine at night. I value my bedtime. Just vitamins. Too many important interviews, too many good parts. It has so much like a character in a Jacqueline Susan novel. It was hilarious. You know how I think about that time now, Bill? No. She sipped her tea. Her eyes never leaving his. It's a moving belt, about a quarter of a mile long. I know the walkway, he said, but I don't see what you're. You just stand there, and it carries you all the way to the baggage claim area. But if you want, you don't have to just stand there. You can walk on it or run. And it seems like you're just doing your normal walk, or your normal jog, or your normal run, or your normal all-out sprint, whatever. Because your body forgets that what you're really doing is topping the speed the walkway is already making. That's why they have those signs that say, slow down, moving rampway near the end. When I met you, I thought as if I'd run right off the end of that thing onto a floor that didn't move anymore. There I was, my body 9 miles ahead of my feet. You can't teach your balance. Sooner or later, you fall right on your face. Except I didn't, because you caught me. She put her tea aside and lit a cigarette, her eyes never leaving him. You could only see that her hands were shaking in the jitter of the lighter flame. It started first to the right of the light cigarette end, and then to the left before finding it. She drew deep, blew out a fast jet of smoke. What do I know about you? I know you seemed to have it all under control. I know that. You never seem to be in a hurry to get the next drink or the next meeting or the next party. You seem confident that all things would be there if you wanted them. You talked slow. Part of it was that main draw, I guess, but most of it was just you. Chat, I'm about to get into my own stream real quick since somebody else is here watching me. Gotta have someone to watch me, right? Why not myself? Last one, Trans. Sorry, chat. You need to get. Oh, yeah. You won them. You talk slow. Part of it was that main draw, I guess. But most of it was just you. You're the first man I ever met out there who dared to talk slow. I had to slow down to listen. I looked at you, Bill, and I saw someone who never ran on the walkway. Ah, shit, honey. You're the first man I ever met out on who dared talk slow. I had to slow down to listen. I looked at you, Bill. I saw someone who never ran on the walkway, because he knew it would get him there. You seemed utterly untouched by the hype and hysteria. You didn't lease a Rolls to say you drive down Rodeo Drive on Saturday. All right. Alright, so yeah. You didn't have a press agent to. I'm gonna check to see how many pages I got left. Chat. See, 1, 2, 3, 4. About another 9 pages, chat. Didn't have a press agent to plant items in a variety or the Hollywood Reporter. You'd never have done the Carson show. Writers can, unless they do also do card tricks with Ben Spence, he said, smiling. It's like a national law. He thought she would smile, but she didn't. I know you were there when I needed you. When I came flying off the end of the walkway like O.J. Simpson, you know what hurts, Dad? Maybe you saved me from eating the wrong pill on top of too much booze. Or maybe I would have made it out on the top other side on my own. It's all a big dramatization on my part. But it doesn't feel like that. Not inside, where I am. She snuffed the cigarettes. Only 2 puffs gone. I know you've been there ever since. I've been there for you. We're good in bed. That used to seem like a big deal to me. But we're also good out of it. And now that seems like a bigger deal. I feel as if I could grow old with you and still be brave. I know you drink too much beer and don't get enough exercise. I know that some nights you drink badly. He was startled, naturally startled, almost frightened. I never drink. She smiled. She smiled. So you tell the interviews when they ask where you get your ideas, but it's not true. Unless it's just indigestion when you start groaning in the night. I don't believe that, Billy. Do I talk? He asked cautiously. You could remember no dreams. No dreams at all, good or bad. Audrey nodded. Sometimes. My goodness. Have notifications? Shout out to you up in the stream. Fuck you, phone. I'll just sometimes, but I can never make out what it is he say. And on a couple of occasions, he wept. He looked at her blankly. There was a bad taste in his mouth, trailed back along his tongue and down his throat like the taste of the melted aspen. So now you know how fear tastes, he thought. How you found out? Considering all you've written on a subject. You suppose it was a waste of time he'd have to get used to, if he lived long enough. Memories were suddenly trying to crowd in. It was as if a black sack in his mind was bulging, threatening to spew noxious dreams, images up from his subconscious and into his mental field of vision, commanded by his rational waking mind. And if that happened at once, it would drive him mad. He tried to push them back and seceded, but not before he heard a voice. It was as if someone else had been buried alive and cried out from the ground. It was Eddie Casbach's voice. You saved my life, Bill. Those big boys, they drive me bug shit. Sometimes I think they really want to kill me. Your arms, Audrey said. Bill looked down at them. The flesh there had humped into goose flesh. Not little bumps, but huge white knobs like insect eggs. They both stared, saying nothing, as if looking at an interesting museum exhibit. The goosebumps slowly melted away. In the silence that followed, Audra said, I know one other thing. Someone called you this morning from the States and said you have to leave me. He got up, looked briefly at the liquor bottles, and then went into the kitchen and came back with a glass full of orange juice. He says, you know I had a brother. You know he died, but you don't know he was murdered. Audra took in a quick snatch of breath. Murdered? Oh, Bill, why didn't you ever tell you? He laughed and then barked and sound again. I don't know. What happened? We were living in Derry then. There had been a flood, but it was mostly over. George was bored. I was sick in bed with the flu. He wanted me to make him a boat out of a sheet of newspaper. I knew how from day camp the year before. He said he was going to sail it down the gutters on Witcham Street and Jackson Street because they were so full of water. So I made him the boat, and he thanked me, and he went out to. And that was the last time I ever saw my brother George alive. If I hadn't had the flu, maybe I could have been there to save him. Maybe I could have saved him. He paused, right palm rubbing his left cheek, as if testing for beard stubble. His eyes, magnified by the lenses of his glasses, looked thoughtful, but he was not looking at her. It happened right there on Witcham Street, not too far from the intersection with Jackson. Whoever killed him pulled his left arm off, the way a second grader would pull off a wing off a fly. The medical examiner said he either died of shock or blood loss. And as ever I could see, it didn't make a dime's worth of a difference which it was. Christ, Bill. I imagine you wonder why I've never told you. The truth is, I wonder myself. Here, we've been married 11 years. Until today, you never knew what happened to Georgia. I know about your whole family, even your aunts and uncles. I know your grandfather died in his garage in Iowa City, freaking around with his chainsaw while he was drunk. I know those things because married people, no matter how busy they are, get to know almost everything after a while. And if they really get bored and stop listening, they pick it up anyways, by osmosis. Or do you think I'm wrong? No, she said faintly. You're not wrong, Bill. Shout out to everybody who's in stream watching. And we've always been able to talk to each other, haven't we? I mean, neither of us get so bored it ever had to be osmosis, right? Well, she said, until today I always thought so. Come on, Audra. You know everything that happened to me over the last 11 years of my life. Every deal, every idea, every code, every friend, every guy that ever did me wrong or tried to. You know I slept with Susan Brown. You know that sometimes I get maudlin when I drink and play the record too loud. Especially Grateful Ted, she said, and he laughed. This time she smiled back. You know the most important stuff, too. The things I hoped for. Yes, I think so, but this, she paused, shook her head, thought for a moment. How much does this call have to do with your brother Bill? Your brother Bill? Let me get to it in my own way. Don't try to rush me into the center of it, or you'll have to be you'll have me committed. So big and so quantity, quantity, quaintly awful. I'm trying to sort of creep up on it. You see, it never occurred to me to tell you about Georgie. She looked at him, she frowned, shook her head faintly. I don't understand. What I'm trying to tell you, Audra, is that I haven't even thought of Georgie in 20 years or more. But you told me you had a brother named. I repeated a fact, he said. That was all. His name was a word. It cast no shadow in my mind. It cast no shadow at all in my mind. I think it maybe cast a shadow of your dreams, Audra said. Her voice was quiet. The groaning, the crying? She nodded. I suppose you could be right. But dreams, you don't remember, don't really count, do they? Are you really telling me you never thought of them at all? Yes, I am. She shook her head, frankly disbelieving. Not even the horrible way he died? Not until today, Audra. She looked at him and shook her head again. You asked me before we were married if I had any brother or sister. And I said I had a brother who died when I was a kid. You knew my parents were gone. You know you've got so much family that took up your entire field of. It's been in that black hole. I haven't thought of dairy itself in 20 years. Not the people I chummed with. Not the people I chummed with, Eddie Casberg and Richie the Mouth, Stan Years, Bev Marsh. He ran his hands through his hair and laughed shakily. It's like having a case of amnesia so bad, you don't know what you got it. When Mike Hanlon called. Who's Mike Hanlon? Another kid we chummed with, that I chummed with after Georgie died. Of course, he's no kid anymore. None of us are. That was Mike on the phone. Transatlantic cable. He said, hello, have I reached the Denver residence? And I said, yes. He said, Bill, is that you? And I said, yes. And he said, this is Mike Hanlon. It meant nothing to me, Audra. You might as well have been telling me he is some encyclopedia, some Burl Ives records. And then he said, from Derry. And when he said it was like a door opened inside of me, some horrible light shined out. And I remembered who he was. I remembered Georgie. I remembered all the other doors. All this happened. Bill snapped his fingers. Like that. And I knew he was going to ask me to come. Back to Gary. Let him know again. Come back to Derry. Yeah. He took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes, looked at her. Never in her life had she seen never in her life had she seen a man who looked so frightened. Back to Derry. Because we promised, he said. And we did. We did. All of us kids. We stood in the creek that ran through the barrens. And we held hands in a circle. And we had cut our palms with a piece of glass. So it was like a bunch of kids playing blood brothers, only it was real. He held his palms out to her, and in the center of each, she could see a close set ladder of white lines that could have been scar tissue. She held his hands, both his hands, countless times. But she had never noticed these scars across his palms before. They're faint, yes, but she would have believed. And the party, that party, not the one where they had met, although the second one formed a perfect bookend to the first one. It had not been the rap party at the end of the pit of the Black Demon chute. It had been loud and drunk, every inch of into the Topanga Canyon deal. Perhaps a little less bitchy than some of the other LA parties she had been to, because she had gone far better than any right to expect. We all knew it. Roger Phillips had gone even better, because she had fallen in love with William Denbrough. What was the name of the self-proclaimed palmist? She couldn't remember now. Only that she had been one of the makeup man's two assistants. She remembered the girl whipping off her blouse at some point in the party, revealing a very filmy bra underneath, and tying it over her head like a gypsy scarf. High on pot and wine, she had red palms the rest of the evening, or at least until she had passed out. Audra could not remember now if the girl's readings had been good or bad, witty or stupid. She had been pretty high herself that night. What she did remember was at one point the girl had grabbed Bill's palm in her own and had declared them perfectly matched. They are life twins, she said. She could remember watching, more than a little jealous, as the girl traced the lines on his palm, with her exquisitely lacerated fingernail. How stupid that was. In a weird LA film subculture where men patted a woman's fannies as routinely as New York men pecked their cheeks. But there had been something intimate and lingering about that tracery. There had been no little white scars on Bill's palms then. She had been watching a charade with a jealous lover's eye, and she assured her of the memory, sure of the fact. So she said so to Bill now. He nodded. You're right, they weren't there then. Now that I can't absolutely swear to it, I don't think they were there last night, down to Plow and Barrow. Ralph and I were hand wrestling for beers again, and I think I would have noticed. He grinned at her. The grin was dry, humorless, and scared. I don't think they came back when Mike Hanlon called. That's what I think. Or I think they came back when Mike Hanlon called. That's what I think. Bill, that isn't possible. But she reached for her cigarettes. Bill was looking at his hands. Stan did it, he said. Cut her palms with a silver Coke bottle. I can remember it so clearly now. He looked up at Audrey behind his glasses. His eyes hurt, and he puzzled. I remember how that piece of glass flashed into the sun. It was one of the new clear ones. Before the Coke bottles used to be green, you remember that? She shook her head, but he didn't see her. He was still studying his palms. I can remember Stan doing his own hands last, pretending he was going to slash his wrist instead of just cut his palms a little. I guess it was just some goof, but I almost made a move on him to stop him, because for a second or two there, he looked serious. Bill, don't, she said in a low voice. This time she had to steady the water in her right hand by grasping it in her wrist, its wrists in her left, like a policeman holding a gun on a shooting range. Scars can't come back. They're either there or aren't. They either are or aren't. You saw them before, huh? Is that what you're telling me? They're very faint, said Audrey sharply. More sharply than she had meant to. We were all bleeding. We were standing in the water not far from where Eddie Casberg and Ben Hanscom and I built the dam that time. You don't mean an architect, do you? Is there one by that name? God, Bill. He built the new BBC Communications Center. We're still arguing about whether it's a dream house, whether it's a dream or an abortion. Well, I don't know if it's the same guy or not. It doesn't seem likely, but I guess it could be. The Ben I knew was great at building stuff. We all stood there. And I was holding Bev Marsh's left hand. Am I right? and Richie's toesier is right hand to my left. We stood out in the water like something out of a southern baptism after a tent meeting. And I remember I could have seen a dairy standpipe on the horizon. It looked as white as you imagine the robes of the archangels must be. We promised, we swore, that if it wasn't over, if it ever started to happen again, we'd go back and we'd do it again and stop it forever. Stop what? She cried, suddenly furious then. Stop what? What the fuck are you talking about? I wish you wouldn't ask, Bill began, and then stopped. She saw an expression of bemused horror spread over his face like a stain. Give me a cigarette. She passed him back to back. He lit one. She had never seen him smoke a cigarette. I used to stutter, too. You stuttered? Yes, back then. You said I was the only man in L.A. You ever knew who you dared to speak slowly? Truth is, I didn't dare talk fast. It wasn't reflection. It wasn't deliberation. It wasn't wisdom. All reformed stutterers speak very slowly. It's one of the tricks you learn. Like think of your middle name just before you introduce yourself. Because stutterers have more trouble with nouns than any other words. One word in all the world that gives them the most trouble is their own first name. Stuttered. She smiled. A small smile. And if you had told a joke, then she had missed the point. Until Georgie died, I'd stuttered moderately, Bill said, and already had begun to hear the words double in his mind, as if they were infinitesimally separated in time. The words came out smoothly, in his ordinary slow and cadence way, but in his mind, he heard words like Georgie and moderately overlap, becoming Georgie and moderately. I mean, I had some really bad moments. Usually when I called on in the class, and especially if I really knew the answer and wanted to give it. But mostly I got by. After Georgie died, it got a lot worse. Then, around the age of 14 or 15, things started to get better again. I went to Cheverus High in Portland. There was a speech therapist there, Miss Thomas, who was really great. She taught me some good tricks, like thinking my middle name just before I said hi. I'm Bill Denbrough out loud. I was taking French, and French 1. She taught me how to switch to French if I got badly stuck on a word. So if you're standing there feeling like the world's the greatest asshole, saying this but over and over like a broken record, you switched over to French and c'est la vie will come flowing off your tongue. Worked every time. And as soon as you said it in French, you could come back into English and say this book. No problem at all. If you got stuck on an S word like ship or skate or slum, you could lisp it, tip, skate, or slum. No stutter. All that helps, but mostly it's just forgetting dairy and everything that happened there. What up to the open chat? Because when it's forgetting to happen, we were really important. I was going back to Cheverus. I didn't forget everything at once. But looking back now, I'd have to say it happened over a remarkably short period of time. Maybe no more than 4 months. My stutter and my memories faded out together. Someone washed the blackboard, and all the old equations went away. He drank what was left of his juice. When I stuttered on ask a few seconds ago, that was the first time in maybe 21 years. He looked at her. First the scars, then the stutter. Do you hear it? You're doing that on purpose, she said, badly frightened. No. I guess there's no way to convince a person of that. That's true. Stuttering's funny, Audra. Spooky. On one level, you're not even aware it's happening, but it's also something you can hear in your mind. It's like part of your head is working an instant ahead of the rest. Or one of those reverb system kids used to put in their back in jalopies. back in the 50s, when the sound of the rear speaker would come just a split second after the sound in front of the speaker. He got up and walked restlessly away around the room. He looked tired. She thought with some unease how hard he had worked over the last 13 years or so, as if it might justify the moderateness of his talent by working furiously, almost nonstop. She found himself having a very uneasy thought about that and tried to push it away. But when again, suppose Bill's call had really been from Ralph Foster, inviting him down to the Plow and Berry for an hour of arm wrestling over backgammon, or maybe from Freddie Firestone, the producer of Attic Room, or on some problem or other, perhaps even a wrong ring, as the very British doctor's wife down the lane put it. What did such thoughts lead to? Why, the idea all this dairy Mike Hanlon business was nothing but a hallucination. A hallucination brought on by an incipient nervous breakdown. But the scars, Audra, how do you explain the scars? He's right. They weren't there, and now they are. That's the truth, and you know it. Tell me the rest, she said. Who killed your brother George? What did you and the other children do? What did you promise? He went to her, knelt before her like an old-fashioned suitor, proving this marriage, and took her hands. I think I could tell you, he said softly. Think if I really wanted to, I could. Most of it I don't remember even now. But once I started talking about it would come. I can sense its memories, waiting to be born. It's like clouds filling with rain. Only this rain would be very dirty. The plants that grew after a rain like that would be monstrous. Maybe I can face that with the others. Do they know? Mike said he called them all. He thinks they'll all come, except for maybe Stan. He said Stan sounded strange. It all sounds strange to me. You're frightening me very badly, Bill. I'm sorry, he said, and kissed her. It was like getting a kiss from an utter stranger. She found herself hating this man, Mike Hanlon. I thought I'd explain as much as I could. I thought that would be better than just creeping off into the night. I saw some of them were just made used to do that, but I have to go. I think Stan will be there too, no matter how strange he sounded. Or maybe that's just because I can't imagine myself not going. Because of your brother? Bill shook his head slowly. I could tell you that, but it'd be a lie. I loved him. I know how strange that must sound. They're telling you I hadn't thought of him in over 20 years or so. But I loved the hell out of that kid. He smiled a little. He was a spasmoid, but I loved him. You know? Aja, who had a younger sister. Naja. I know. But it isn't George. I can't explain what it is. He looked out the window at the morning fog. I feel like a bird must feel when it comes from in it knows. Somehow it just knows it has to fly home. It's instinct, babe. And I believe instinct's the iron skeleton under all our ideas of free will. Unless you're willing to take the pipe or eat the gun or take a long walk off the short dock, you can't say no to some things. You can't refuse to pick up your option. You can't refuse to pick up your option because there is no option. You can't stop it from happening any more than you could stand at home plate with a bat in your hand and let a fastball hit you. I have to go. That promise? It's in my mind like a fish hook. She stood up and walked herself carefully to him. She felt very fragile, as if she might break. She put a hand on his shoulder and turned to him. Take me with you then. The expression of horror that dawned on his face then, not for horror of her, but for her, was so naked that she stepped back, really afraid for the first time. No, he said. Don't think of that, Audra, he said. Don't you ever think of that. You're not going within 3,000 miles of Derry. I think dairy is going to be a very bad place during the next couple of weeks. You're going to stay here and carry on and make all the excuses for me you have to. Now promise me that. Should I promise? She asked, her eyes never leaving us. Should I, Bill? Audra, should I? You made a promise, and look what it's got you into. And me as well, since I'm your wife and I love you. His big hand was tightening painfully on his shoulders. Promise me. Promise. Puh, 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 puh. And she could not stand that. That broken word had caught in his mouth like a gaping, wrangling fish. I promise, okay? I promise. She burst into tears. Are you happy? No, Jesus. I'm crazy. This whole thing is crazy. But I promise. He put an arm around her and led her to the couch. Brought her brandy. She sipped at it, getting herself under control a little bit at a time. When do you go then? Today, he said. Concord. I can just make it if I drive to Heathrow instead of taking the train. Freddie wanted me on set after lunch. You go on ahead at 9. You don't know anything, you see? She nodded reluctantly. I'll be in New York before anything shows up funny, and in Derry before sundown, with the right connections. And when do I see you again? She asked softly. He put an arm around her and held her tightly, but he couldn't answer. But he never answered her question. All right, and that is finally the end of chapter 3. The next thing is titled Dairy Interlude. Oh, the first interlude, which I am not reading it tonight. Well, I will read it probably tomorrow or tomorrow's sermon. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Later.